The video you're about to watch has been designed to take you deeper, higher, and wider into Yahweh. Enjoy, and please subscribe. Thank you.
Father, we just glorify and magnify your majestic name as we're in you, and that's incredible. And of course, the ecclesia up to this point haven't really understood the fact that as spirit beings, we get to step into you. We get to live and move and have all of who we are inside of you, where we draw not just from your power, but from your glory, from wisdom, revelation, knowledge, insight inside of you that gets literally blown and breathed into who we are. And we live from out of that place, from out of that kingdom that's inside of you. We live from out of there into the earth. We live from out of your four faces, the lion, ox, eagle, man. We begin to understand the significance that each of your faces carry as we bring that into the earth, Father God, as sons and daughters, living beyond the veil, operating as the body, you being the mind, you being the head, directing every step. We are oracles. As you speak, it begins to reveal those mysteries and secrets to the earth as we speak it into the ground, and it begins to go into the sons, into the daughters, into your people, Father, and there's so much change. And we're excited, Father. Tonight I ask you to come and just bless everyone in this room. Lord, it's a holiday season, and it's not really the favorite thing to do to come out to a meeting. It's not what people are desiring to do right now. But yet, Father, there's always some that can, some that's faithful. So I pray, Father, that as we come to a conclusion regarding body, soul, and spirit, and understanding of the glorified being, and how you desire for us to operate as the new creation, and what that entitles. I ask, Father, that you'll open us up, open every spirit man in this room. Let's begin to understand the change, the shift that's taken place, that we are no longer human beings, but we are now spirit beings, that our spirit and our soul and our bodies lives in our spirit, that we are overshadowed by your glory, your fire, the fullness of Yeshua, the fullness of your light. And that vibration, that hovering, that frequency that you release over us is what changes the earth, is what aligns all things back into place. But we begin to understand that we live out of you, and that is the alignment of frequency. That's when we begin to understand who we are, because whenever our spirit man returns with that vibration, that frequency in us, and we come into the earth, it changes. It takes authority. It demands your glory into the earth. Father, it's incredible, and I know that we don't always understand these things, but I also understand that you are busy revealing to us, you're opening us up, you're busy changing our belief systems, and you're pouring into us revelation to propel us to a higher place. My King, we love you, we praise you, we absolutely glorify your name. You're incredible. Amen. Okay, yeah, you guys enjoy that song? I absolutely love the song. Basically, it just says, cover us, talks about the seven spirits. They come and teach us, they come and train us. Everything we've been teaching on the seven spirits, basically in that one Hebraic song, which is incredible. But for the last couple of weeks, the last 3 weeks, right, we have done understanding body, soul, and spirit. This is maybe a quick recap. The Father gave me an encounter, or he didn't give me an encounter. I was in the kingdom of heaven, and he started revealing certain things to me. And there was 3 rivers. In the beginning, there was 3 rivers, right? I talked about that already. And then as I kept engaging this to have a greater understanding of it, at a later stage, I began to realize that there's actually 4 rivers. And the 4th river, everything that was in the other 3 rivers was in this one river, and where the other 3 rivers flowed into the kingdom of heaven, into Eden, into all of creation on this side of the veil, this river kind of just flowed into a tree. I say a tree, but it was the tree. It looked like the tree of life. Now, whether it's an actual tree like what we perceive a tree to be, I'm not too sure, but that's what I perceived it. That's what I could understand at the moment that I was engaging it. And I understand and I believe that it was the tree of life, understanding that that's represented in its full capacity of who Yahweh is. That is the tree of life, which we can engage with, we can eat of and drink of, right? And how the Father wants us to understand. Now, over the last 3 weeks, we've gone through the body, soul, and spirit. We started with the spirit, and we understand that the spirit was designed to eat of the riches that is in the kingdom of heaven. And the reason being that as a spirit being bound to my soul since the day of birth, it's lost the understanding and revelation of the kingdom. It has to, when it gets divided, when you get born again and you divide soul and spirit, the spirit has to now start going back into the kingdom of heaven to regain the knowledge that it lost in the time and season that it was bound to your soul. That makes sense, right? And the process of regaining that knowledge is when we begin to engage. That's where we walk with the seven spirits. Now, we haven't taught the seven spirits in the school yet, but we will. But the idea of it is that my spirit now begins to engage in the kingdom of heaven, where I go in not as a baby. It's been a misunderstanding because of the translations we have of the word. But in the original, it doesn't say born again, it says born from above. And it's not even being born per se, it's just the activation of my spirit once again. Because I get born again, or I get reactivated by choice. I choose Yeshua, and I begin to engage in relationship, and that sparks my spirit back into the original place where I come from, and I get to see and engage. He says that those who are born from above can see the kingdom of heaven. And we understand the kingdom of heaven is where Paul was caught up into, right? Which is, we understand, it's not the third heaven, but it's the full supply of heaven, which relates to the kingdom of heaven, where we are seated in heavenly places. Like, one of those heavenly places is the kingdom of heaven. And of course, it's the Father's desire for us to begin to understand what is in that kingdom for us as the ecclesia, to begin to engage and understand the difference between being on this side of the veil as a spirit being and being on that side of the veil as a spirit being. It's completely different. Like I always say, this side of the veil, we have the bride mentality. It's all about the gifts. It's all about your faith and how you must study the word, meditate on the word, pray every day, seek his face, worship him, and then you will grow in all this. Where behind the veil, it's a whole different ballgame. You know, on this side of the veil, I need faith to believe in him. On that side of the veil, I don't need faith to believe in him because he's in front of me. I still need faith because it's the currency of heaven, but it's a different dimension of faith. Everything steps up a level, everything changes. The revelation of who and what we have believed on this side of the veil progresses into a higher place, a higher dimension of truth. So things elevate. And of course, in this place, the Father's desire for you is to regain all the riches of the heavens, because you're an ancient being and you've always had the knowledge of who you are. That's why you agreed to your scroll. That's why you allowed the Father to send you into your mother's womb. And then, of course, we were born into sin, covered by the soul, and slowly but surely we were taught, trained, and equipped according to what we engaged in the earth. When you get born again, everything has to change. You have to reactivate your spirit. Your spirit starts going in. You start walking with the seven spirits. They start teaching you, and you start growing as a son, a king, a priest, an oracle, and a legislator. Right? That's kind of where we are now. Then, of course, the idea of all of that is that my spirit man has to now download that into my soul, which is always thrilling. We understand in Hebrews where it says, for the word of God is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and marrow, and is the discerner of thoughts and intent of the heart. This scripture deals with body, soul, and spirit. It deals with the division that needs to take place for you to be a three-part being, divided from each other, reunited in Christ. And now it's the reuniting in Christ that brings you to a glorified state. And that's the process we're in right now. According to the Bible, this is what we've been taught, and I want to make it clear to you, although it's true, it's not true. When you get born again, nothing is instant. I don't know if you know that, except that your spirit is now reactivated. So you're a three-strand being instead of a two-strand being. But in essence, we actually grow to become a four-strand being, which is in a higher place. Why? Because it's body, soul, spirit, and of course we are in oneness with him. So that adds to you. That's why we are the only creation on the planet that looks like him. We are of a higher creation level than any other being on the planet, because there's nothing and no one else created in his image. That's why we are the most precious. That's why all creation is focused on us. And everything that's not in line waits for us to propel us into place, to propel them into place. Exciting, isn't it? Yes. Okay, so I want us to be reminded tonight that we're going through the soul gates, and that was the idea. Now that my spirit has all this engagement and knowledge of who Yahweh is, my soul has to begin to receive all the things that my spirit's engaged into. And for you to receive the things that your spirit's engaging in, you have to open your soul gates. Right? We've gone through the soul gates. It was basically your conscience, and the idea behind that is that you have to clear your conscience. But you have to remind yourself that you're in Christ and not outside of Christ. Anything outside of Christ is going to shift your conscience to a different place. And it can also sear your conscience, which means you will continue in habitual sins without feeling the guilt. Not that we are guilty in any way, fashion, or form. He has restored us. But because of habitual sins, your conscience can be seared. You will continue to do something and not thinking that what you're doing is wrong. We call it sins of omission. And of course the Father wants us to open that gate, clean it up. And that is of course your responsibility. Same as reason, same as imagination and understanding that it's imagination, not fantasy. Your imagination is to be aligned, not your fantasies. The fantasies is the out alignment of imagination. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we want to activate our imagination and shut down fantasy. And that's where we begin to understand when we go into the kingdom of heaven, or even when we just take somebody on a journey. Make sure that you're always engaging in the 9 skins. Whatever you engage, if you see a vision, you have to understand, when I'm running with my thought pattern, which means I'm running with my imagination in this gate, I have to have 9 things in place. And I say 9 things, but I want you to understand it's the skins. And I think we've done the skins here. It is Holy Spirit, it's righteousness, joy, and peace. What you're engaging, is it leading to righteousness, joy, and peace? What you're engaging, is it the way, the truth, and the life? What you're engaging is it justice, judgment, and holiness. That's the 9, I wouldn't say steps, but that's the 9 things you want to look at when you have an engagement or when you go into the kingdom of heaven. You know, you're not going to heaven to go to a restaurant. You're not going to heavens to go play golf. You're not going into the kingdom of heaven to go shopping. You're not going to go to McDonald's. If there's anything like that in your engagement, there needs to be alignment in what you see. Because the Bible doesn't say that that which is in the earth will be in the heavens. It says that which is in the heavens will be in the earth. Now you say, well, if it's on the earth, then it must be in heaven. That's not what that scripture means. Because what we have in the earth is designed and created by the worldly pattern. Now, I don't know what I'm going on. Just make sure that your imagination gate is open, because that is really key. And we're looking at your mind, our conscious, our subconscious. This is where the Father really just wants you to be reminded of what needs to be aligned. Because your mind is part of your soul. Your emotions is part of your soul. I don't want to go into too much of this right now because we've done it already. But remind yourself that you are no longer run with your emotions. You know, because I say especially women, but I can't say that anymore because men's the same. They're all run by emotions. I feel angry. Okay, well, you feel angry, but you're not angry. Or you can say I feel angry, but you can't say I am angry. I am angry, I am sad, I am happy. You know, there's emotions that's not supposed to direct your day. You understand what I'm saying? I look at some of my friends, they would come in an early morning spinning class, and I could see that they were affected by a feeling. And that could start a pattern in their day. But we are not directed by our feelings, right? And of course, if you are directed by your feelings, it's a gate that needs to be opened. There needs to be alignment. And of course, we align these gates through going into courts, dealing with things in our past, because the gates are shut because of things we've gone through, the way we think, a pattern that's been shaped in our minds. And you can understand this by, and I know this might not be the best example, but if you look at, and I only say this because I recently watched the movie Cool Runnings. You guys remember that? It was really funny, but the guy that sits in front, the one that steers, what he had to go and do, he had to go study the course. He had to go study the racetrack, every turn, and how he has to shift, and how everybody in this little thing had to turn at the same time. He was the one in charge and had to go memorize the entire course. And that's kind of what the Father wants us to do with this. You need to go and memorize, as you go into the kingdom of heaven, what it was like. How you were supposed to be settled in your gates, how the gates are supposed to look when they open, what you're supposed to look as a being that is completely aligned, and the Father can just pour everything that needs to come into you, into you. Then of course we're looking at choices. What is the choices that you're making? It's the final gate. It is how you are aligned with the things the Father wants to bring to your plate. The if that makes any sense. Then we were talking about the body, and we went through some steps, of what the body would be like, what it would look like. It would be one flesh, but it would be glorified. It would be full of the glory of the Father. It would look like Yeshua after this resurrected state. It would be able to shift it from one place to another. It would be able to change appearance. There will be much in our natural that will look completely different. We look at Moses coming down the mountain as a physical being, yet there was lightning bolts and fire coming out of him. They say in the original that it was ox-like appearances coming from his face, lion, ox, eagle, man, as he was shifting while coming down the mountain. There's a state that we can't understand in natural. And of course, when we begin to understand what the Father wants to present us with in what we have right now, it changes everything. If you read Revelations, there's some freaky stuff that according to John is going to start happening in the age that we're in right now. And we can't believe that would happen, but for that to happen, there's a company of people that need to begin to believe this stuff, that need to begin to walk in some dimension that's higher than what we are in right now. And of course it's already happening. There's a whole company of people already stepping in to the deep things of Yahweh, living out of the kingdom of heaven, igniting their spirit beings and beginning to walk as glorified beings in the earth. Exciting, right? We understand that the glorified body will be able to eat food. The glorified body will be immortal and incorruptible. But yet it will be flesh and blood. But it will be different than what we perceive it. Something interesting, according to history, when Thomas stuck his hand into the side of Yeshua, his arm, now this is I don't know if it's a myth or it's a true history, but they say, now one of my friends, he always used to introduce himself as a they, because they know everything. Nowadays it's Google. But anyway, he says, they said that his arm never deteriorated. And of course his ministry was supernatural. Everything he did was supernatural. He led a whole nation to the Lord in one supernatural act, by addressing their gods, addressing those who worship other gods, and doing something just supernaturally. And basically what I heard happened is that he came to a place where they were busy throwing water up into the air for their gods to receive the sacrifices. And their water just kept on coming down. So he walked up to them and said, "Your God must not love you." And they said, "Why?" "Because he's not receiving a sacrifice." And then he took water and he threw it up in the air, and it just stopped in mid-air. And that's basically how that whole nation came to the Lord. Now, we have to understand, his arm went into the was before the was, if that makes any sense. It's going into a dimension, into a realm, into the physical, that changes everything. There's a gentleman called Mark Steen that has experienced this. He was in a motorbike accident. He went into the hospital, stayed there for weeks. Eventually, he disappeared out of the hospital for a couple of days. They couldn't understand where he was. When he came back, he was operated on, and he was in recovery. They never operated on him. As a matter of fact, they couldn't understand what happened to him until he kind of explained himself a little bit. But what happened is he was taken up into the heavens, body, soul, spirit. Then the Father showed him what he needs to do in his body to bring things back into alignment. He did that and came back into the earth, and he's now functioning without a brain, just a blue flame burning in his head. So he's this glorified being operating from the life and the fullness of Yahweh, which is kind of incredible. We don't even know how that works. But the body is a dimension that we have to open up completely, because we are not happy with ourselves. There's no one I know, except if you're a bodybuilder, but even if you're a bodybuilder in peak season, you're going to find problems. You're going to find something you don't like. Might not even be your body. It's always something that we hate about our bodies. And of course, the conditioning of our understanding is that, well, this body's going to die. This body gets sick. This body doesn't work with me. I want to run, but my body can't run. I want to jump, but my body can't jump. These things, I want to do double back somersault with a twist, but my body doesn't want to do it. And you get to kind of resent your body and hate your body. And of course, the Father's desire at this time is for us to begin to see what needs to change in the way we think. Because your body, soul, spirit is all as important as what you could possibly be. My body is not more important than my soul. My soul is not more important than my spirit. My spirit is not more important than my body and my soul. And the Father just wants us to get to that place where we believe that. Okay, so getting to the new creation. The Father is desiring this season for us to begin to believe. Now I say it's to begin to believe because it's not that it's just going to happen. Because He says in Isaiah that there's a company of people. So it's not even for everybody. Now it is for everybody and it's available to everybody, but is everybody going to run with it? Is everybody going to want it? You know, I remember in South Africa I had friends that literally didn't want to speak in tongues, that didn't want to have anything to do with demons, didn't want to have anything to do with anything deeper than just going to church on a Sunday and reading the Bible only in church, maybe pray at night before they go to bed, but that was enough. Now for me that's never been enough. You know, I always wanted to go deeper, I always wanted to go higher, I always wanted to do the things that nobody else wanted to do. And I believe this company of people will be those that enter in and understand what it means to be a new creature. Now understand that when He says the old man has died and the new has come, it is a being that has never been on the face of the planet. Right? That's why the Father kind of wants us to begin to understand that what we've had up to this point was a measure of something that we haven't even touched base on yet. You know, what we have seen in the supernatural is really just the gifts in operation. Now, the gifts are incredible. How many of you ever seen the dead raised? It's pretty incredible. I've seen it in my own ministry. I've seen it 3 times, including a cat. I've seen it on ministry videos where a friend of mine, one of our pastors, went to a ministry in Africa where this guy would literally line the dead up in a row and he would walk by. And it even goes up to day 7. They would show miracles that's just crazy. This one specific miracle was of a young man that was basically left to die outside of a house. He had what you call anal cancer. So all he had was a massive, bloody, pussy hole in his bum. There wasn't a bum, it was just a big hole with blood and pus, and you could see the bone, and he was basically just dying. They brought him in there, and of course it stinks. I mean, it's rotten, he's rotten. He can't walk, he can't talk, he can't do anything, it's in his body. This guy laid hands on him, and they started filming him over a 2-week period. And after 2 weeks, they came back with that footage where his bum, or his massive pussy hole, was 2 perfect bum cheeks. You know, and of course we have looked at the signs and the wonders and thought, wow, that's incredible, that's what it is. It's the healing the sick, raising the dead, looking at all these things, and it's incredible. You know, if you look at some of the miracles of old, where people would pray for somebody that doesn't have an arm, and the arm would grow out. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? But the Father says that the new creation, now you look at this and think, well, wasn't that the new creation? The born-again man is the new creation, according to the Word. But we have to begin to understand something here, and this is key. The new creation is a company of people that believe of a high dimension. It is not the company of people that stays on this side of the veil. This side of the veil is the born again. Beyond the veil is another creation that is birthed out of Yahweh and that begins to operate at a higher level, a new dimension of all of what the Father wants to pour into a company of people. That's where Isaiah says, and this company of people will literally live out of Zion. And in Zion they will be taught by the Father, where body, soul, spirit begins to align and go into the kingdom of heaven, where we appear and disappear into different dimensions. Now, I know how crazy this sounds, but one of the testimonies I heard was where this Mark Steen guy wanted to show his kids something around the tree, and I shared it there before, and he fell into the tree. Literally went into the tree, like a ghost walks through a wall. You know, Ian Clayton talks about testimonies of friends that he has that literally have the ability to walk through walls nowadays. He says there was a time where he was at a meeting and he was trying to pick up a chair and his hand kept on going through the chair. Now this is crazy stuff. I remember just believing in my heart how the Father wants to begin to, and this was way before I started walking any of these things. But in my heart of hearts, I always knew that there was more than what we've walked in right now. And I believe you understand, it's in you to believe that there's a higher dimension. It's in who we are to believe that the Father is opening the gates of heaven for us to go into. And in these places in the kingdom of heaven, things are opening up. That's why we are beginning to understand what it means to truly eat of Him and truly drink of Him. All of what I'm trying to teach tonight goes hand in hand with communion and hand in hand with stepping into the yard, the hay, the vav, the hay. Now I think I've done a small teaching of that already here, but the idea of the yard, the hay, the vav, the hay is the Hebrew culture. where the high priest would step behind the veil. And of course, if the high priest steps beyond the veil and there's sin in his life, he's dead. Right? But for him to step in beyond the veil, and of course we understand that he would walk through the veil, which is another dimension of transrelocation that we don't understand. There was no opening. That's why when Yeshua died on the cross, the veil was torn from the top to the bottom. Then it became a curtain. Right? It wasn't like that before. It was just one solid mass of material. And of course, for generations, each priest that passes away, his garment will be sewn to the veil. So eventually that veil was 30 centimeters thick and weighed probably about 800 to 900 pounds. Because they say it weighs about 400 kilograms, which is about 800 pounds. Now, that's a lot of weight. For a high priest to lift up, or even to move to the side, it's a lot. So what they said would happen is he would walk through it as a completely glorified being. Now you have to understand, these high priests had access to what we would today call the cross, the blood of Yeshua, because their access was through the light into another dimension. And it was all about relationship and intimacy. It's part of their bloodline that was chosen. If you look at Enoch, it was about intimacy and relationship. If you look at Moses, it was about intimacy and relationship. If you look at David, intimacy and relationship. If you look at Isaiah, it was intimacy and relationship. If you look at Paul, intimacy and relationship. If you look at John, which we now beginning to believe that he didn't die. Now maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but it was about intimacy and relationship. That's what really truly opened up dimensions for the sons of Yahweh to go into different realms, so that we can begin to fall into what the Father has designed for us to walk in. If you begin to look at, what was I talking about? Oh my goodness, shifted into something. What was I saying? Anybody going once, then twice, you'll try it. Okay. Okay, so the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and begin to sing the Yod Hey, the Bath, the Hey. Now it's not a song, but he would breathe his breath out into the Yod. He would turn, he would breathe his breath into the Hey. He would turn again and breathe his breath out into the Vav. And he would turn again to all four corners of the earth and blow his breath into each letter. And that would literally represent him stepping into the name, stepping into Yahweh. And we're beginning to understand that's the Father's heartbeat for this generation as a new creation, where we step into him physically. Now you have to understand, and I said this before class, that the church believes all the stuff, but they believe it according to what's written and according to what has been spoken. So it's not something that we believe because we physically stepped into it. It's something we believe because it's written, we've studied it, we've meditated on it, and it's been preached. This season, the Father is looking for a company of people that understand that we are spirit beings and we get to go into the kingdom of heaven, which is again not a place I have to go to. It's not something I have to, it's not a traveling dimension I'm going into. It's shifting from where I am to the kingdom of heaven, which is in the same place. Because the Bible tells us it's at hand. The kingdom of God is at hand. So in this season, as a new creation, we have to begin to believe. Now I said that we have to begin to believe because it's not something that's just going to happen. It's the belief system in us that needs to change. Because you have to remind yourself, for the last 2,000 years, all we've known was the flesh. This is the reality. There's nothing more than this. This is the truth. Everything outside of that is spiritual. Everything outside of that is soulish. This is the true reality. And we're beginning to understand now that we are spirit beings that this is not the true reality. Eternity is the true reality. Understanding that our infinite God has opened up dimensions for us to go into so that we can begin to understand our eternal purpose, our eternal destiny, and who we are eternally. That changes everything because in that revelation I have to change my belief system regarding death, regarding what I eat, regarding what I drink, regarding where I go, where I walk in. Everything I do in this earth has to shift and change. Now it's the new creator or the new creation that will begin to walk in the things the Father wants to align for the ecclesia in this time and season. And we can't believe it, so we're not going to receive it. But there's men and women in the earth that's already beginning to believe it. Now we've shared some of the testimonies already, but there's men and women that have physically disappeared. There's men and women that have been engaging in the kingdom of heaven, where angels have gone into dreams of leaders in the nations told them to come to a specific place at a specific time, and there is a gathering of 5,000 to 10,000 people, because everybody was led by an angel to come to this building. And then the lady that preaches there, or the man that preaches there, appears as in a translation from one nation to another, starts preaching and then disappears again back to where they were. And we don't understand that stuff, because that's not something that's just going to happen all the time. But the Father wants us to begin to believe that there is a company of people that will begin to believe this stuff and walk in the fullness of it. You know, we're experiencing things like gold dust, diamonds, rubies appearing in mid-air. Why? Now, we don't always understand why would the Father do that, but I'm beginning to understand the Father is revealing to us things that the sons and daughters of Yahweh is bringing back into the earth without realizing. Because that's the matter that is busy forming in the earth. So if you go into the kingdom of heaven, the understanding is that I get to bring back what I have there into the earth. And the idea is, of course, to bring back my glorified state into this place, where as the Son of Yahweh, I begin to understand who I am in the kingdom of earth, knowing that death is no longer my Savior. I don't have to die to engage in any other stuff. As a matter of fact, death is no longer a covenant that I have. Because I don't understand, 99% of everyone I know have made a covenant with death. Because we believe we have to die. But the only scripture that talks about the death that we have to die is in the Old Testament, and it talks about no one will grow older than 120 years old, right? And it was all part of a curse. Now, we believe some of what the Bible says, but we don't believe all of the Bible. So if Yeshua fulfilled the law, then that's no longer something we need to worry about. But if you believe it, then that's where you're going to end up. Now, am I saying that I'm never going to die? I pray to God that that's something I can say. But it's still a system in my belief that has to change. It's still an understanding that I have to align, because I'm just constantly finding myself in my body having problems. Now, not all the time. I'm not a sick person. I'm not dying in any way, fashion, or form. But I can feel it in my knees. I can feel it in my hips. I understand I've been a bodybuilder for 30 years. I feel it in my shoulders sometimes. I wake up and I struggle to breathe a little bit. I'm still recovering from asthma over the 5 or 10 year period that I struggled with it. There's much in my body that contradicts what I believe and that which I perceive out of the kingdom of heaven. So now I go into the kingdom of heaven and I look at these 4 rivers, and they have literally become one. Now they have become one in my perception, because what I believe is changing. They still 4 rivers, and they still have the same value in each of them, but the one I'm focusing on is the new creation. And I believe that's where the Father wants us to be. He wants us to focus on the new creation. He wants you to begin to believe in your heart that, and now please also understand, it's not about levitating, it's not about appearing and disappearing, it's not about going into the heavens. As a matter of fact, all the things that we talk about, it's not about any of it. And if I have to give a key, there's only one key, and the key is relationship. The key is intimacy. The key is worship. And what I've noticed in my own life, the deeper I go in worship and adoration, the more things open up for me. The more I begin to understand, the more I begin to see. If I go into the kingdom of heaven, the first thing I personally want to do is I want to go be with my Father. Matter of fact, I only go into the kingdom of heaven at any given time, as many times as I want to go find my Father, to go spend time with Yeshua, to go engage with Holy Spirit. I don't go in just because I want to go see what's out there. Now, I used to do that in the beginning because that's the ignorance of a child, right? A child, no, I'm not divorced, and I'm not planning on getting divorced. But if there's a situation in my life where and even if I look at friends, you know, if my 3-year-old come to me, he's missed me, haven't seen me in a long time. He really only wants to be with me for a couple of minutes. Then he wants to go play, right? But as they grow older, and I look at this because I would go visit my parents, and I would sit with them, and we would talk for hours. But when I was a little kid, I would say, hey, how you doing? And I'm out on the streets to go play. And in the beginning, it's kind of how it is. You go in, and you just want to go experience and see what everything is that's out there. And I've said this before, but I remember the Father coming to me and saying, my son, there's just too much for us to do for you to continue playing around. And it's time to get to what needs to be done. There's intense things that needs to be aligned. There's too much that needs to change. and I need you to engage what I have for you. So now I'm going into the kingdom of heaven to spend time with my Father, but as I go in to spend time with my Father, He begins to send me assignments. To engage with the seven spirits, to engage with an angelic canopy that needs to be aligning certain things in the earth that I have assignments over, certain things the Father has allocated to my scroll that I need to do. It's a little bit more than what we've experienced up to this point, like going to church on a Wednesday, maybe a Sunday, and reading the scripture before you go to work, maybe when you come home before you go to bed, and maybe praying a couple of, asking the Father to supply some needs, forgive some sins, telling him you love him, a little bit of snot, a little bit of tears, and then we are okay. There's a little more to it than that, right? We're beginning to understand that the Father is opening up dimensions within the kingdom of heaven so that we can legislate what we walk into the earth. Now, you have to understand something. For me to believe the stuff that I'm telling you tonight, my spirit man have to overshadow my soul and my body. My spirit man is the primary being, not the most important. He is the primary being. And the primary being lives in Christ. My spirit man can consume and be consumed by the fullness of the glory of Yahweh. All of who Yahweh is can overshadow my spirit and I'll be fine. Because my spirit is the full image of Yahweh. My soul and my body, on the other hand, has to still go through the process of being glorified. So when the fullness of Yahweh comes over my soul and my body, there's a physical reaction. That's why it might not be the main reason, but that's why there's laughing and crying and falling and shaking. And we can't contain the presence of Yahweh. And again, remind yourself that the fullness of Yahweh's presence has never been in the earth. Okay, it's never been in the earth. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why Yeshua had to come in the shape of man. Because he cannot the presence of Yahweh cannot be exposed in the earth in its fullness. It will kill and destroy everything because it's not been designed for it. If you look at Yeshua on the cross, when his blood started falling to the ground, that's that congealed light that comes out of the fullness of the glory of Yahweh. That is who he was. And that was also the restoration of his deity in that process of his death. When his blood fell on the ground, rocks burst open. There was all of a sudden darkness, earthquakes. The dead was raised up, and of course the veil torn. That's just 4 things that happen in the earth because his presence with it, and it's just for a very small portion of the time. Not even in its full capacity, but a measure greater than what's ever been seen in the earth. Now, we have to understand, my spirit man that's engaging in the heavens, my spirit man has the capacity to receive all of Yahweh. That's why he says, live in me, move in me, and have your being in me, because I need to have the value in the kingdom of heaven of what needs to change in my right now. My perception of the soul, my perception of my body. How my soul or my spirit overshadows what my spirit believes, or my soul believes, How my spirit overshadows what my body believes, because my spirit's in Christ, my spirit has the value and the fullness of Christ, and the fullness of Yahweh in it. And when I bring it into the earth and it overshadows my soul and my body, it literally begins to pour into me the things that my body and my soul needs to believe for me to be aligned into that new created being that the Father is longing for the ecclesia to begin to walk in. How are you guys doing? So the process that we're in right now as the ecclesia is really to begin to believe. And it's not much that you have to do other than worship and engage. And I get text messages from people that I honor and love and say that I'm struggling to engage. I'm struggling to engage. I struggle to engage. Everybody struggles to engage. It's not something you can just do all the time. When you're in a meeting like this and there's corporate worship going on, engaging is easy. When you're in your house and there's babies crying, cats meowing, dogs barking, lights going on and off, kids snoring, beds making a noise, all kinds of stuff happening, engaging is a little more difficult. You know, when your day and your activity in your day is happening around you, engaging is not that easy. But it's understanding that you have to forcefully come to a place in your life where you begin to understand that engaging is not what we've made it to be. Engaging is worshiping in your heart, presenting yourself to Him, walking as a spirit being in the kingdom of heaven and operating literally in 2 different places at the same time. And understanding that it's really just that play. Now, I know this doesn't make too much sense right now, but my spirit is constantly doing all kinds of stuff that my soul and my body is not aware of. And I have to come to that alignment in my being to come to a quiet place where my spirit and my soul gets to communicate, where my spirit downloads what it's been doing into my spirit, so what my spirit into my soul, so what my spirit's been doing can become a reality to my soul and my body. And as that happens, it slowly but surely begins to change my physical body. Now, I'm not the oldest person on the planet, but I'm 43 years old, turning 44 in a couple of months, and I do not for 1 second feel as old as what I am. Matter of fact, I feel like I was when I was 20 years old. Now, maybe that's just a mindset. Maybe my body's not quite in the state that what it was in when I was 20 years old, but I feel that I'm stronger today than what I've ever been. I feel that I'm wiser than what I've ever been. I feel that I've got a clearer mind than what I've ever had. I feel that I'm more on fire for Yahweh than ever before. I feel like I could live forever. You know, and I really believe it's because of we engaging. And a matter of fact, the Father said to me that every minute I spend in the Spirit will be a minute added to my life. And I'm beginning to understand that as soon as I struggle to engage and I don't, how many of you ever rebelled? It's kind of our nature. The specialty, Homo sapiens' specialty is to rebel. Maybe not yours, but it is. And every time I rebel in my heart against something that I'm struggling with, I step out of the Spirit and I feel how my body slowly but surely deteriorates. I can feel it in my health. I can feel it in my physical. I can feel the weight that's gained on my body. Now, I'm not talking about fat, and I have some of that, but I'm talking about just the weight of the flesh taking over. Then I realize, and I quickly have to get back into the Spirit. Quickly have to realize, wait, I need to engage at a higher level. Now, when I say engage, I'm talking about worship. And the new creation is a person operating in the fullness of who Yahweh is. And we have to begin to understand, my soul and my body cannot perceive this. That's why living out of the kingdom of heaven is key to receiving the fullness of this. And understanding whenever I'm in the kingdom of heaven, no matter what I'm doing in the kingdom of heaven, is worship unto Yahweh. And that worship, that intimacy, that relationship that I'm gaining in the time that I'm in the kingdom of heaven is what aligns my body and my soul to what I'm supposed to be in the fullness of what the Father has destined for me as a new created being today. Amen, right? Let's stand up. How you guys doing? Father, we just want to thank you and praise you. We are reminded tonight that it is something in us that needs to change. It is a perception, it is the way we think, it is alignment that needs to come as we engage with you, as we worship you and glorify you and magnify you. Father, your word is a gateway into everything. Your word in every dimension of it, whether it is the written, whether it is the spoken, whether it is the living. We have the responsibility to go into it. We have the responsibility to engage into who you are, Yahweh. Begin to understand your four faces and what you want for us out of it. We begin to understand that your desire for us is to live and move and have our being in you. That we need to begin to soak and eat and drink of Yeshua and to understand what it means to literally be in the Yod Lahei, the Shem, the Vav Lahei, to operate from inside of Yeshua in his name. Not to speak his name, to say, well, blah, 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 in the name of Jesus. And that will be the magic charm. We're beginning to understand that as new created beings, we step into Yeshua and we live out of those four letters that literally represent the fullness of who Yahweh is, who Yeshua is, and the power that that name carries, that the position that we're in literally projects the fullness of your glory as we speak it into the earth. And Father, as that new creation, we begin to understand who you were, not when you were only in the earth, but the full state of your release, when you were reestablished as the deity of Yahweh, when your resurrected state was in the earth for 40 days. That is who we are meant to be. We are meant to be reestablished into that image, and we begin to understand who you were and who you are even today, that we are seated in you in heavenly places, and the dimensions that you've opened up for us, the places we are seated in, is so that we can rule, so that we can be the kings that you have king over. We can be the lords that you are lording over. We begin to understand your desire for the ecclesias to grow into this new creature, to grow into this dimension that you've opened up for us. Begin to understand that a glorified being is what you've called us to walk in while we're on the earth, not when we die. In a matter of fact, your desire for us is to begin to change our belief system regarding death and to be elevated into all that you have for us. Father, we love you, we praise you, we honor you and worship you in Jesus' name. Amen.